All right, so just pick up the subject. Okay.
And just make sure you're speaking in the mic. And then, if anyone has questions, all that we do is ask, you raise your hand, bring the mic to you, so that way everyone online can be able to hear you. Okay?
Well, welcome, everyone. Everybody having a good conference so far?
Is your mic on?
Yeah. I just gotta get a little closer, I guess. All right. All right, well, welcome. This is Introduction to the Water Quality Exchange. Definitely the most exciting topic here at the conference. So I appreciate all of you being here. This is a pretty full room for this. This is my first time at this conference, so I'm having a great time, and I really appreciate that there was a big need for this here. So we're happy to be here and try to remove some of the confusion around WQX, and just point out we also are sitting over here doing one-on-one support. So if anyone has more detailed questions, because we're just going to get into a little bit of the introduction today, and then definitely when you dig into doing WQX for yourself, feel free to reach back out to us at the help desk, not just here at the conference, but anytime when you're back at your office working on this. So my name's Adam Griggs. I'm an ecologist from the EPA's Office of Water, Water Data Integration Branch. I've been there just over a year now, and I'm leading up all of their outreach and user support. So putting together trainings like this, new training resources, trying to make WQX a little more approachable and less painless for folks. So today what we're going to cover, we're going to do a brief life cycle of water program data. You know, what is it that we're trying to get through, and how do Office of Water applications help us do that? What is WQX and how does it work? And then we'll start digging in a little bit to introduction to WQXWeb, which is the web application, some of the templates that we have, import configurations, what is the real meat of WQX, and how to get started. So this is kind of just, you know, a simple life cycle of water data. This probably isn't anything new. This is what we're all trying to accomplish out there. We design our monitoring programs. We go out and collect the data. We have to manage that data in some fashion. And then eventually we can do some analysis and assessment that eventually leads to actions, so that we can restore and protect our waters. But the technical challenges of data management, particularly in data analysis, are where a lot of programs really hit some hurdles, because these are technical challenges to manage data appropriately. At the Water Data Integration Branch, we have a couple of products, so I wanted to go ahead and introduce them and put them on this slide where they fit in this life cycle of data, because that can make things a little confusing if you see all these things separately. So I'm going to show how they connect together. WQX, which is what we're here for today, is basically just a data standard. There's not really a program behind it or a database. It's really just a way of describing water quality data. So when you submit data in WQX format, where it actually ends up being available for people to retrieve is the water quality portal. So that's the data sharing. In that checkered box, we've got a new product that we're working on right now, tools for automated data assessment. So we're working on ways to automate analysis and assessment of water quality data that resides in the water quality portal. These are going to be our tools, and I think Christina Mullen in our branch is leading up the development of the Tahoe project. If you're interested in that, I believe she is currently forming a tribal work group to get input on the development of Tahoe. So if that's something that's interest to you, taking advantage of it or having an input on some of those resources that they develop, let me know and I can get you in touch with her. Attendees is where we list assessment decisions about our water. So after we go out and we monitor them and we assess them for their quality, we list waters if we find that they're impaired for a certain pollutant or not. And Attendees is where that happens. Just curious, in the room, how many folks in their programs currently submit data to WQX? Okay, about half the room. And how many are entering waters into Attendees? Nobody yet. Into Attendees? Not yet, okay. So I think they started a pilot about 5 years ago with tribes. I think they've got about 30 of them in there so far. And then eventually How's My Waterway that's an information platform that gathers data and information from a variety of resources and helps you, it displays all that information in one place. It pulls data from Water Quality Portal, from Attendees, from Echo, and just collapses all that information for your watershed. We have some brand new in development with the various tribal representatives. We've been building some new tribal pages. Similar to the way the states had an entry page and was showing information about their programs. We've got that on our development site now. So if that's something you want to take a peek at, you can come by the table at any time during the conference, and I'll be happy to open up our development site and show you what some of those new tribal landing pages look like, where we're defining their waters and the information they've collected and showing that on How's My Waterway. So the Water Quality Portal, this is where all your data ends up if you submit to WQX. It has over 410 million records from over 2,000 agencies and organizations. And you can filter the data in a number of ways. It's quite powerful. Who's here has pulled data from Water Quality Portal before? So again, maybe a little less than half the room. I highly encourage you guys to check out this website if you are interested in seeing what data might be upstream of your lands or has been collected on your lands. See what data resides in the Water Quality Portal for your organization. If in the past you guys were submitting data to WQX and you want to know what's there, this will tell you what has been submitted in the past. And we've got some online training videos that'll show you just how to use this and identify your organization and pull your data down. I think one of the most powerful things about the Water Quality Portal is not only you can go to the website and you can put in your search filters and it'll give you back a CSV of data. But everything that comes out of the portal also is powered by REST-style web services. So you can just have any program, Arc Online, for instance, Google Data Studio, send a URL query to the Water Quality Portal, and it'll automatically return that data to you in real time, and it'll be in your application. If anyone wants to see demos like that, I can do that also any time over there at the table. We can real quick just see what data might exist for your organization or nearby, and I can show you how you can just pull that into a map and start to visualize that information. This is a slide real quick on the TDA project, in case you guys are interested. Again, stands for Tools for Automated Data Assessment, and it's going to be an R package and eventually a R Shiny web platform application. And it's using open source development approach. Anyone can contribute code to this right now on GitHub. And we are standing up a tribal work group to specifically get input and expertise from tribes on how they might want to make use of such a program to complete their assessment of their data. The Attendees pilot I mentioned started in 2016. So this is for those tribes that have adopted water quality standards, and they are now listing and assessing their waters. It started as a pilot in 2016 with 13 tribes spread across 3 regions. And these days, I think we're up to almost 30 tribes have submitted to Attendees, which is great. And so this is an objective or a goal for your program. Jesse Borman-Paget, Laura Shumway, they lead up the support to tribes on Attendees. So if you have any questions about that, they're in my group as well. I'd be happy to connect you. And this is where it goes. If you haven't been to How's My Waterway, this is where all that data and information flows. So again, How's My Waterway isn't a database. It doesn't store information. It simply reaches out to public sources of information that we've made live and compiles it right there in your browser. So anyone can build something that pulls these same data sources that How's My Waterway does. So this is just an example product that we've built that gathers and organizes these different sets of data. But again, the underlying data sets are all open and available via services. So you can simply set up a tool that stores that URL, retrieves the data, and turns it into information for you. We've got some brand new pages now that also show the monitoring data at each location with nice graphs, and you can select different parameters and characteristics that you want to graph. You can drag a slider and view things, how they're changing over time. And all of that's done on the fly on data out of the water quality portal. Tribal assessment data was added to How's My Waterway just in December 2020. We created a new cultural use group that was added, and we're displaying both tribal data and data that's been collected by other parties in the area on the monitoring pages, so you can get that full suite of information that's being collected in your area. Okay, so those are our yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it looks like results are showing impaired. Like how are those being evaluated?
So that would be the standards and the decisions that you enter into Attendees. So we won't make any decisions to label something impaired. If you're seeing this show up in How's My Waterway, that means that the tribe in Attendees has decided that those waters were impaired for whatever use and criteria that they had developed. Yep. And keep the questions coming. I want this to be as informal as possible. So,
are the standards available as well? So like if you clicked on it, then it could tell you exactly how they determine that?
No, the standards aren't stored within Attendees. The Office of Science and Technology has created something called the Criteria Search Tool, which is they have gone out and tried to gather all of the different assessment methods and criteria that agencies across the country have created, and they've made a list of them. And they have done the same thing for tribal agencies as well. So TDA will leverage the criteria search tool so that we can see those numbers and those decision points, but this information just shows the final decision that they determined. So yeah, how they got there isn't necessarily stored and shown here. Yeah.
We have a virtual question as well. I just thought I'd bring it up while we're answering some. This is from Modesty, and she's just saying that she is requesting more training on Attendees. That is, she mentioned it was a little bit too confusing after the May 2022 101. She asked if it's a replacement for the WQX. And do we have to use Attendees if we already use the WQX? So maybe just like what differences.
Yeah, sure.
And then also she mentioned possibly she would like to be added to the next WQX user call meeting. So if there's a way people could be added to that.
Sure. Yeah. So if I forget any of these parts, let me know. So the main difference, so WQX has been around for a while, as has Attendees. They're not replacing each other. They work in tandem. Where WQX is just water quality data, just the data with no decisions. Attendees is just the decisions that you've made about those waters. So they're actually quite separate because in the middle of that is your assessment process. Whatever you use to determine your data, whether those waters are meeting or impaired, and then you just put your decisions in Attendees. The next WQX user call is actually tomorrow at 12 Eastern. If you want to get on the listserv, you can ascend on the WQX upload page. If you click on more program information at the bottom of that web page, you can get to instructions for joining the listserv. You just send an email to that listserv, and that's where we send out routine information about WQX. If there's going to be service interruptions, it's where we also send out announcements for the monthly user call, which will be tomorrow. Yeah, in the back.
Yeah, so I've looked into WQX a little bit. Oh, sorry. My name is Luis Santana. I'm fisheries biologist for Robinson Rancheria. So I looked into WQX because we're trying to put all our data in there. And one of the things that I collect is where there's disconnection in streams. So like where there's stranding pools. And I haven't figured out if there's a way to do that, or if there's already like if there's a system in place, or there's something in the future. Because one of the reasons we do that is for stranding events. We go out and do fish rescues.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if there's a way to do that, because like in a lot of the streams, I'll have like sections of, it could be anywhere from 20 meters to 200 meters that's disconnected, and like I have all that data available, but is there a way to put it in to WQX?
Yeah, so I don't know offhand if anyone has submitted that data before, but they could. The system is open-ended enough that if you ever find that we haven't created some way to properly characterize your water data, let us know, and we can add new characteristics, new features to make sure that you can describe it. So in the case of your example, that would be habitat data. We do have some sections of the schema that allow you to define a reach length. So you can take a lat long point at the beginning of your reach and at the end, or every time that you want to segment that and describe what occurred in the middle. And then you can enter and submit any number of your own habitat characteristics as long as you give us a definition for it, and then we can input those, and then you can submit using that. So yeah, follow up with me afterwards. I'd be very interested in trying to figure out how to help you put that data in. Fisheries data is one of the areas I'm working on right now because we don't have great guidance on that part of the schema. I actually think it's probably one of the least developed parts of the schema is fisheries data, because there's so many different ways that you guys can collect information, whether you're doing community assemblage, individual measurements, metrics, IBIs, or even fish tissue. We can take all of that, but it does go in a little differently each. So, any other questions? All right. So jumping into the meat of it, what is the water quality exchange and how does it work? So I mentioned it's just it's a water quality data standard. It basically just describes ways of sharing data. It isn't a database or a program or anything. Anyone can simply submit data in WQX format, and then we have some tools that help you get there, to get to that WQX format. And that often is where a lot of the confusion arises, because they'll find one tool or the other. They're not necessarily sure how these things work together. Hopefully we'll be able to explain some of that today. It's designed to be automated, so keep that in mind. A lot of people, they find this painful way of hand entering or transferring their data from the way they have it to the way that we want it for WQX. And that's very time consuming and not something that everyone wants to repeat every year. Hopefully you'll see as I explain some of the ways that you can get into WQX. No matter what your starting data set looks like, if you're getting lab reports, you can define the nature of those data sets in our WQXWeb application. Teach it what your data set looks like, and it will do the transfer for you and translate it to the WQX standard, so that next year when you have that same data set, all you have to do is hit that button and it's going to remember all the decisions that you made and translate that data into the correct format. So that second to last one, the structure of your data systems don't matter. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Can we just submit the raw data that we receive from the lab instead of having to retransform it into the WQX platform?
Yes, you can. So we can start with your data set exactly as you receive it, and then you're going to have to do a little more work on the import configuration, which is what teaches our application how to read your data set. So say you just call dissolved oxygen DO. Well, so we need to know DO equals dissolved oxygen. And so you can just teach it column by column in piece of information, what this is in your data set, what is the WQX version of that, and then you save that import configuration. So the next time you get a lab report, you just resubmit that same data set with that import configuration that's saved for it, and it'll do the translation. So who keeps their data sets in Excel spreadsheets? Probably most of us, right? So you can submit that Excel spreadsheet probably just the way that you have it. Or if you have it in a relational database, you can create an export. Some folks are storing their data in their Arc Online systems. Some folks have enterprise level solutions that they've bought and paid for, like Aquam's out here, will do the WQX thing for you. It's a database management system that will automatically export to WQX. So there's a number of ways to get there. So how you necessarily have yours, WQX is agnostic of that. So you can, wherever your starting point is, we usually have a path to get there from that. So a little bit about how data is organized in WQX, because this is important, because none of us store our data this way. on our own. But that's because when you're storing data, you want a nice clean data set that you can quickly make sense of and analyze. But when you're submitting data, we need to know a little bit more information about it so that it can be just as useful to other folks as well. So this is the way that we store data kind of in 3 levels in WQX. First, we need to know your organization and all the information that's about your organization. And then you can create a list of projects and information about those projects. And any one organization can have many, many projects if they want. And any organization can have many, many locations that they monitor at that might be part of one or more of those projects. So you submit a table of just your stations, just your locations. And then finally, you submit your results data, and that simply refers back to the project and location information to get that and map it up together. So this is a little different to how most folks store their information. This is called a stacked format, where each characteristic is in one column, and then alongside it, you've got additional pieces of information, the value, the unit, the sample method, things like that. In many of your data sets, you probably have a different characteristic in each column. So all your dissolved oxygen is here, your conductivity is here. We can easily translate between those 2 formats, but we need to have it this way so that we can store all the metadata about that sample result. What piece of equipment was it? What was the sample method? What are your detection limits associated with that? And so it just gets stored a little differently. So the major pieces of WQX and the major requirements are basically these 3 things. We've got a set of available fields. There's about 350 different fields that you can use to submit to describe your data. Most likely, all of you will only need a handful of those. If your programs get very complicated, lots of different biological species, habitat, then it gets more complicated. But if you're just going out there, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we just had a question in the chat, and there's asking for a clarification on where can we find the decisions made on how the water quality standards were created that allowed the person who entered it if it was impaired?
So that's going to be in your assessment document. So for each this is kind of an attains question about assessment decisions that you make on your data to list whether or not water is impaired or not. I am not a part of that program, but as far as I understand it, each of them has to submit an assessment document which describes how you guys do your assessments, and those numbers and decisions are in that document. They don't make their way into WQX or Attains, unfortunately. Okay, so we've got available fields. You might only need a dozen of them, but we've got 350 if you need. Allowable values. And this means that we're all going to submit dissolved oxygen using the same name. So this one can't be DO, and this one's DO, milligrams per liter. We all have to use the same name. That way, when it all goes in, it can all come back out the same. So that's what we mean by allowable values. And you can find a list of those allowable values from our WQX domain service. And then last are the rules and requirements. And those are basically just the business rules that it goes through and checks. So that if you said, I collected a fish sample, it's going to say, okay, they're saying that they're submitting a fish sample. I need to know the species. I need to know what was their sample collection equipment, so on and so forth. If you're saying that you collected a lab sample, it's going to go, okay, well, we need to know information about that lab sample. What was the analytical method that the lab used, so on and so forth. So those rules and requirements basically just are, that's what the schema is going through and checking to make sure that your data set's complete. So these are really the 3 big pieces. Yep, go ahead.
Are there no QA rules? Like if I say my water temperature was 300 instead of 30, is that checking at all?
Yeah, so we don't we won't flag or stop incorrect data necessarily, but we do have a QA/QC service, which is fairly new. So now when you import data, it is going to go through those types of checks. So we've got observed ranges for all the data that we've had submitted to us over the years. So if you do submit a 300-degree water, we'll say, hey, are you sure about that? Because we've never seen 300-degree water before. It's also going to check to make sure you've got the correct units. So, you're not submitting nitrate in cubic feet per second. It's also going to look for the right combination of analytical methods and speciation for those nutrient measures. Nutrients need to be reported with an extra little thing. Was it nitrate as nitrogen or nitrate as nitrate? So we do have that new service now, but that's after the fact. So you can import your data and then you're going to get a report back, and it'll take basically your whole data set and then add 4 little column flags, and it'll put a flag in there and say, are you sure this looks like it was out of range? And so then you can look and say, ooh, you're right, I caught some mistakes, I'm going to correct that and resubmit. So that's a new service for us.
That's in your submittal report?
Yeah, you get a report back. You can log back into WQXWeb. After it completes its import, you'll get an email saying your import's completed, and now those 2 reports will be available. You can go and review those. This is our first iteration of it. We're eventually going to make this work on the inbound. So before it gets imported, it'll stop you and give you those checks. And we're also going to try to get them available on the outbound from the water quality portal. Right now, you can only get them for the transaction inside WQXWeb. But that's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question kind of along those lines because I know that since they initiated the WQX, there hasn't really been a QA QC component to it, really, like compared to like air monitoring that definitely has many levels of quality control. And so, is it just based on the regulations that there's no QA, or is it just the limitations of the software? Because I know I've seen that over the years, you guys improved for it before. You could put non-detect and the units would still be on there. And now if you say non-detect, then it tells you, well, you don't need units, and vice versa. If you have a value, now it'll tell you that you need the units of measurement for that value. And so I was wondering if more, like you said, more QA features are coming in the future, whereas if there's like a definitions tab that can be compared to that value. So if we know we're using DO, then we're not going to be in like whatever, like micro milliliters, whatever, of water. Same thing with degrees of temperature.
So part of that difference is honestly the difference between Clean Air Program and Clean Water Act, where Clean Air Act set national standards for, I think, the primary 6 pollutants that they regulate. That doesn't change across the country. Where at the Clean Water Act, it's implemented at the state level because, frankly, our waters are all a little different. What might be the right level for one state or area or tribe is not necessarily going to be the right standard for somewhere else. And same thing for how the data they could just collect on the ground is so different. So we've had to create a very open system. So we don't necessarily have those checks and balances on it, but we do have requirements for minimum data description. Like, we need to know these minimum elements about your data in order to make it useful to others. And then largely we leave that quality determination up to the user. So as somebody who wants to use your data, once they pull it down, they're going to get all that metadata that you assign and say, okay, they're using a really nice piece of equipment out in the field. I can trust this data. Or they're just using the $50 whatever it is. I'm not sure if I can trust it.
Yeah, one of my recommendations would be to incorporate at least a component of it right now. So to make it easier for especially tribes that are have limited staff to know when you've exceeded the threshold, even if it's like on just our end, to be able to know that, like, hey, we've exceeded this one, so the field is red. Something simple as that, especially to our leadership, it's kind of hard. I mean, otherwise we're stuck having to make our own graphs and then put our own line on Excel to kind of show them, hey, it's gone past this red line, versus if we had something else more formal, say, oh, like the field is red because we've exceeded the threshold of our standards. And that would also make it easier for when we report to Attendees to show that that's part of our process of justifications of why it is impaired.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is that new product that we're building, the TDA, that is going to reach into WQX, into the water quality portal, pull all your data back out, go to the criteria search tool and bring down your assessment decisions and your criteria, and then do just that. It's going to do the assessment for you. It's going to flag data that's out of range, so on and so forth. We kind of keep that stuff out of WQX just because this is just, blinders on, take your data. I'm not going to make decisions about it. I'm not going to tell you it's good or bad, but I'm going to give you a chance to describe and share it. And that's all this tool does. And then the stuff you're talking about is like the next step. Anything else? Okay. So I would say if you're new to WQX, these resources can actually be kind of hard to find. They're not necessarily described in a very cogent manner that points out just how important they are. For instance, that data exchange template up at the top, you'll find that in a section on our website that says it's just for custom resources, but it is literally like it describes the fields that are available. It's one of the most important pieces of information to consume. I'm in the process of trying to redesign our support pages, so hopefully they will be a little more obvious to some of these things. But yeah, the domain list, the data exchange template, and the business rules are kind of the three big pieces that define WQX. So let's look at what some of these requirements are, like the business rules, required metadata. For your organization, we just need to know name, contact information, the type of organization, and an address. For projects, the name, what the sampling design type, was this a randomized sample, was it targeted sampling? Do you have a quality assurance project plan for your data? And then you can actually attach that quality assurance project plan to your project so that others can pull it down as well or have that available. And then for locations, we basically just need a name. We need to know the type of location. Was this a well? Was it a stream? Was it a lake? And the lat long information. And that's pretty much all we need to know about your organization, your projects, and your locations. For the result data, we need to know a few more things. What was the media? Because the water quality exchange can actually take in data from sediment samples, from tissue samples, from water samples, even air samples. And so the media, is it water? Is it tissue? The sample type, was this a routine sample? Was this a quality assurance duplicate? Was it a field blank? Those are different activity types, because often if you go out in the field, you're going to do your regular routine monitoring, and then you might do a whole nother duplicate set. Well, that's a different activity on that same visit. So your activities are really where, a fish collection is a different activity that has different fields associated with it than a macroinvertebrate collection or putting a probe in the water. So those are all different types of activities that we track. And we need to know things like, what was your method? What was your piece of equipment? Pretty simple stuff. For the result level, it starts to get a little more complicated because we need to know, the value, the units, the analytical method that they used in the lab. Did you have any kind of sample fraction? Was this a filtered sample? Was it a whole sample? Things like that have a big difference in doing the analysis. And then I have biological flag there because, of course, if you start to submit biological data, opens up a whole other set of fields that we need to describe that. Fish length, how many were in the group, what was the species, so on and so forth. So there are several ways to submit your data to WQX, and I think this is really important because for a lot of folks that are doing this the first time, I think they find the WQXWeb templates. There's Excel spreadsheets, and they think, all right, this is WQX, this is how I get in here. And they start manually pasting their data into that template. That works. That's a fine way of doing it. And for a lot of folks, that's usually how they start. But that's kind of just the first place. We've got several different pathways. So WQXWeb is our web application that you can go visit, and you register to use it, and it helps you transfer your data into WQX format. We also have the Exchange Network. We have a number of tribes that do submit via the Exchange Network, and that pretty much says, I've looked at your WQX format. We've got technical enough people that we can just do this on our own. We don't need support. We don't need your tools to translate. We're going to generate this WQX style XML data set all on our own. And then we can download a node and maintain that and submit ourselves. So for really sophisticated groups, they're probably in that middle area right there. The DIY guys, they're up at the top. They're using WQXWeb. And then just pointing out that there are a variety of third-party software options out there that you can just buy and pay for to do the data management and submit to WQX. So those are kind of the three main pathways to get there. And really, you know, where you are in your program, what are your internal resources, do you have folks that are good with data, with database management, will help determine which of these pathways is going to be the easiest one for you guys. Any question on this slide? Okay. So what is WQXWeb? WQXWeb is our web application. So this is the DIY path. This is where you come and you upload your data set, and then you teach WQXWeb how to read and interpret that data set. If you do adopt our web templates, which is our standardized Excel spreadsheet that already has all the names correct, then you're in WQX format, and we have an import configuration that matches it automatically. So you won't have to worry about building an import configuration because you adopted our web templates. But if you want to come, say, with a lab report that you get every month, you're going to want to build an import configuration that learns how to read that lab report. That way you don't have to be transferring that data into a template every month, taking the time to do that. You'll just teach WQXWeb how to read your data set. So they work together. Whenever I'm working with a group, that's one of the things I kind of ask them, right? Do you want to manually start cleaning up and rearranging and changing your data, or do you want to leave your data alone? Because you're going to put time in to either manipulating your data set, or you're going to put time into creating an import configuration that knows how to read it. If you decide to put all your time into like adopting the WQX web templates, then the import configuration is done for you. If you say, I don't want to rearrange my data and I want to leave it exactly how we have it, then you'll have to put your time on the import configuration and teach WQX web how to read it in. I'm seeing some confused faces out there. Tell me if that was Greek. Okay.
I'm just wondering if the WQX format is compatible with other formats, because I'm looking at, you know, possibly configuring our data to work with swamp data at the state level. And I was wondering if like those two are compatible with each other, like if we're going to reformat or like start out formatting our data in a certain way, I want to make it most compatible with most systems.
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of other data formats that are out there will adopt parts of WQXWeb because a lot of folks have this goal of getting their data here. I'm not familiar enough with the SWAMP program to know whether or not it's close or if it's different. I will say that anytime that you can get your data better organized and you can get it consistent so that you don't have things like monitoring stations where the name is slightly different over time, or you have incomplete information, you want to make sure that your data set is as consistent and complete as possible. If it's consistent, we can probably work with it. Where we have trouble is just where well, we got a new person every 2 years, and every 2 years they did it differently. That's where things get tricky because you have to go back and become a historian and figure out what your program was doing back then, backfill all the information. What was the piece of equipment they were using? What was the test method? So on and so forth. So that's where it can get more complicated. If it's organized and complete, we can work with it.
I just wanted to comment on that swamp data specifically. The Water Board's open data portal, all of that data is funneled from CDN. So the main two, I would say, from that standpoint is like CDN and WQX, which I do know are different in some ways, because I'm also having to deal with that issue. So that's one way that it can be challenging to streamline your data flow processes if you're trying to upload both to CDN and to WQX. They have different requirements for certain things.
Yeah. So as much as possible, we try to work with those regional repositories like Seedon, because we only want you guys to have to submit to one place. So if you're submitting to Seedon and you're getting your data complete and organized and in their format, then we can work with Seedon to just transfer all of their data over to WQX. So that's kind of a model that you see across the country where, regionally you'll have people submitting to a regional database, and then we can just go to that database and do the transfer from there, which takes all of it off your hands. There are some drawbacks to that. I just learned yesterday that the Seedon flow to WQX is broken. So it's not sending data to WQX right now. And I don't know if there's immediate plans to fix it. So they're now on my outreach list. I'll be reaching out to them soon to figure out what we can do together.
Is that on their end? Because we've been trying to do comparison analysis with the regional monitoring organizations, and every time I go on to that portal, it's like, well, I see that they're there, I see that they monitored, but no results will populate. And so I kind of investigated, and I talked to somebody at the state at a regional conference, and they're like, oh, it's not sending anything to that right now. It's like it's a software issue or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's I just wanted to know if that's on their end, that their code is different.
It's on there. It's something changed in their software package, in their node client for how they package up the data from Seedon and submit it directly to the CDX. Something broke there. So we'll have to try to maybe reach out to them and figure out if we can figure out how to fix that. Yeah, because we were doing the same thing yesterday. Folks that thought they were submitting to Seedon and their data was in the water quality portal, we were looking for it and there wasn't anything there. So any other questions? I thought I saw another hand. Okay. Does this aspect kind of make sense? You're either going to have to put work in on getting your data just the way we want it, or you can leave it like that and work on an import configuration. If we have time, I'll try to show you what the import configurations look like, because then it might click. These are our templates. We have a few of them. They're set up for the different major data types. So we have a template for physical and chemical data. So the habitat data, the stream side measurements, width, depth, things like that, rapid bioassessment protocol, and all of the chemical parameters. You'll find support to structure your data correctly for a WQX submission with the physical chemical template. Then we have templates for habitat data, for macroinvertebrates. I'm currently working on a fish tissue template. So one that is just stripped down just to help folks submit fish tissue data. We've got a variety of instructional videos on how to use them. We've got some web user guides. So there's pretty good support for using the templates. They're getting a little dated at this point. They need to be refreshed. You'll find like some 2012 dates and stuff on there. So that's on my job list, is to get in there and update those templates. But they do work pretty well for a lot of people. This is what they look like, basically. So this would be what the locations would look like. If your data comes in looking like this, we'll be able to register and input all your stations. This is what habitat web template looks like. Again, you'll see that there's some fields there that are optional. You don't always need to submit everything that you're going to find in those templates. And some things are required. And then where you'll see the hyperlink, where it's got, you can click on something, that's going to go back to that list of allowable values. That's going to take you right to the domain table for that characteristic. So for instance, we have one domain table of just units, just our acceptable units. All of the different kinds of units are in there. And so whether you're measuring reach length or reach width, or your characteristic result value, all the units have to be in that domain list. So if you go to import and it's saying incorrect unit, you'll know where to look to get the correct one. This is what the chemical template looks like. You can see we're starting to add more fields because there's more stuff out there that we need to track down, because things can be filtered, they can be non-filtered, they can have different speciations of different parameters, or heaven forbid you get a non-detect. And in WQX, if you get a non-detect, that means that we need to know a few more things of information. What is your detection limit? What is the value for that detection limit, so on and so forth, because people will probably use that instead of a 0 for the non-detect. Yep.
How about if you don't measure a parameter?
You don't measure a parameter?
Yeah, because we tried putting NM and it doesn't accept it.
Yeah. So you can simply submit a blank for the value, and then in the detection condition, you can say it was not sampled. So. For the biological data, you can see there's all sorts of more stuff. Now you can start adding the net mesh size and the size of it and how fast your boat was going, everything that somebody might need to know if they wanted to take all the fisheries data, for instance, and compare it all apples to apples. They're going to want to make sure that all these fisheries samples were collected in a somewhat similar manner. So a lot of additional information for the biological data. Things like pollution tolerance values, those change across the country. So from one area of the country, this might be a sensitive taxa. Somewhere else where it's common, it might be more tolerant. So all of that information that you can input to better interpret and understand your biological data. Biological data is definitely where people start to get a little frustrated, because there's just a lot of information there that we need to describe it correctly. How many folks are collecting biological data in their programs? 1, 2, all right. Is that macroinvertebrates or fish or macroinvertebrates? Okay. And we do a better job with macroinvertebrates than I say we do with fish. And we have a user guidance document for submitting macroinvertebrate data. So that one's a little better handled than I say the fish data is. So how you get started, you do need to sign up for an account and register. We've got instructions on our website. You basically just send an email to WQX@EPA.gov. We were registering folks yesterday at the help desk table and even inputting data yesterday. You just simply send some information here. You do need to find your WQX organization ID. If you don't know how to find that, we have a video on our website for how to figure that out at the water quality portal, and to figure out if you guys have data currently in the water quality portal. So the instructional video will be on the webpage right alongside this web account registration information.
I have a question right here.
Yeah.
So we do have a WQX account, but is there a method to add more users?
Yeah. So this is the method to add a user. So for the organizations, we've captured most of the organizations. It's somewhat rare that a new organization comes. Much more frequently, it's a new employee for an existing organization. So if you need a new organization ID, same thing, just send an email to WQX and say, we'd like to create a new organization and start submitting data. And then the registration is for the users, and each user gets permission rights on whether they can read only or they can submit data to that organization. Yeah, in the back.
Well, we were wondering what would happen if we had a user that had a lot of data under their account and they're no longer with us. Do we keep operating under that account, or do we kind of abandon it? Or?
No, so the data is owned by your organization, not whatever employee was working for you at the time. So we can add new users to your organizational account and remove old ones that shouldn't have access anymore. Anytime you guys want to ask us, hey, can you just tell us who's got rights on our account right now? Because a lot of times there's employees going back 20 years that are no longer there anymore, and they're still registered. So sometimes it's good to go in and clean that up. Any other questions on account registration? And definitely the WQX@EPA.gov, that's our help desk inbox. There's 3 or 4 of us that are monitoring that all day. We'll typically get back to you within a couple of hours, maximum 48, but usually it's just a couple hours at the most. And we can happily, hop online with you, help you out, or if it's something that's more than we have time for, we have contractor support as well. So we can bring contractors in to help you guys additionally. I kind of just said this slide a little bit. We also have an 800 number. It doesn't ring our phones. We get a voicemail. So if you do call and leave a voicemail, make sure you're leaving good information for us to be able to get back to you, a phone number or an email address. We mentioned we have a monthly user call. It happens to be tomorrow. Several user guides for various aspects of this process and best practice manuals, a fair number of instructional videos. You can only find 4 or 5 on our website, but we have kind of an off-the-record YouTube channel as well that's got a lot more. So I can share those with you individually. And this last one, I am going to be starting up a new pilot cohort training for the tribes where we work with your data set over the course of 4 to 6 months. That I am just going to start opening that up here in the next month or so. So if that's something of interest to you, if you know you've got data, you know you have to submit, and you want to be a part of a cohort where we're going to be working with your data sets over a course of several months to build up your WQX expertise and comfort in a group of folks who are exactly where you guys are at, please do reach out to me, and I'd like to start registering folks for that cohort training. I've got a bunch of links. I think they're going to make these slides available. I don't necessarily know if they'll be as PDF or will they be the PowerPoints. Do you know? Okay, so then all these links will work. So I've got some collated resources here on various aspects. These top ones are these are the big pieces of kind of the data infrastructure. Water quality exchange, data in, water quality portal, data out, how's my waterway, information out. CDX is where the data is actually held at the National Computing Center. So that's where the data actually sits. And then the exchange network is for those somewhat more sophisticated groups that are going to very much DIY, format it all themselves and submit it through their own node. But we do have some tribes that do that. And so there's separate resources for choosing that pathway. The nuts and bolts I covered, so direct link to the upload resources page, glossary of terms, business rules, and then those 2 really important pieces. The data exchange template that defines every field that we have, and then the domain service, which defines all of the allowable values. So those are the real critical pieces to familiarize yourself with. And I could do a demo. We've got a few minutes. About 5 minutes, I guess, or if we've got more questions, that might take up the time. But if not, I could try to hop on and just give a quick demo of what it looks like. Okay. Can I use? Yeah, can I hop on? All right. Through a browser.
Browser, okay.
So this is Kate Pinkerton from EPA Region 9. I just wanted to say Sophia and I are doing a presentation later at 2:30 in Sand Harbor 3 that will talk about 106 reporting requirements. So basically, if you're wanting to hear what Adam talked about today in like your 106 reporting lens, for example, only one tribe in Region 9 is currently using Attendees. So hopefully nobody got any heartburn about should I be using Attendees? It's still relatively new. It's becoming used more often, but Sophie and I will be talking about that kind of stuff a bit more later. So if you're able to join us at 2:30, I recommend it.
Oh, I can't get it's up there. I can't see it though.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Play back to extended. So now you are. So just
Okay,
touch
it's
screen.
over there. Gotcha. All right. So I'm pulling up a model dashboard that I built that reads data from the water quality portal, and we'll just take a look at that because it's a free tool that It took a couple hours, no programming, no languages involved. But it's just a simple product that can reach into the water quality portal and make use of their URL services and bring that data in, and you can start to explore it. So when you log into WQXWeb, this is where you log in. This is what it looks like on the inside. So let me show you the, let's see. So here first are the listed domain values. So here's where you can find the list of acceptable and allowable values for each field where we have requirements for them. I wanted to show you what an import configuration looked like, because this will hopefully make a little more sense. So in an import configuration, you're going to tell it, I'm uploading, it can be a CSV, it can be an Excel file, it can be some type of text file. So we can take a variety of file types. For instance, when you go to upload your data set, you might have your locations on the first tab and your projects on the first tab, locations on the second tab, and results on the third tab. So you tell it which tab the information is on. And then up here is where you can add generated values. So if, say, you don't have certain metadata like the activity media is water. You guys probably don't have that in your data set because you know you collected water, right? It doesn't seem necessary. So you can add some of those values in here that'll automatically get populated. And then down here is where you describe your data set. So column A, you can tell it what it's supposed to be for WQX, what your title is. And then in here, some really powerful import configuration translations. So you can build a variety of SQL kind of if-then statements. So it says, when in column A it says DO, I want you to turn this into dissolved oxygen instead, and I want you to add the units and the method and everything else. Because in your data set, all you have is the value and the name. But you can teach this to know what to do every time it sees this. So pH, it knows to do this. Dissolved oxygen, it knows to do this. If you have a blank, it knows to then populate those detection condition columns that describe why there wasn't a sample that day. So this is kind of the power of the import configurations. And again, if you use our templates from the web, those are already in here. So you can see here's an import configuration just for reading the biohabitat web template. And so it's set up to automatically match the web templates that we have available. This one matches the projects. So if we look at it, very simple. It's just the same 6 fields that are in that web template for describing your project. And so it's going to know exactly how to bring that in. I guess that's about it. We're about out of time. Any final questions? We can take a quick peek. This should be up and running now. So just you can take a look at what's possible after you go through all that work to get your data into the water quality portal. You can turn it into information. And again, this is a free application called Google Data Studio. But very simply, if I only want to look at microsystem data, the whole dashboard is going to change to just show me microsystem data coming out of the water quality portal. I can see who's collecting it, when they've collected it. And no coding or anything. It's just making use of the water quality portal because you've gone through the hard process of standardizing your data, making it machine readable. So now that it's machine readable, machines can read it and turn it into information. All right. Well, thank you for everyone.